Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, there are a lot of beautiful and whimsical parts of Baldur's Gate 3 worth finding and exploring, but hidden behind a dense field of quests, fun NPCs, and unbelievably interesting equipment, there is a lesser appreciated world of permanent character buffs. These are things that will affect your character or party from the moment that you acquire them until the end of your playthrough, either making you directly stronger or asking you to trade strength in one area for bonus strength in a different one. And while singularly on their own, these buffs may not always be game-changing. If you know where and how to get every single one of them along your journey, that can make your life a lot easier as a result. So today we're going to go over the location and effect of all permanent buffs within the game, going in order from Act 1 to Act 3, and as usual, as the game is mainly story above all else for most people, I will be avoiding direct spoilers as much as I possibly can, mostly just guiding you to the location and the goal. Without further ado then, let's start off with Loviatar's Love. This is a never-ending character buff that gives you a bonus +2 on attack rolls and saving throws for 3 turns, every time that your character hits 30% health or lower. That meaning that the bonus persists if you are healed, and if you aren't healed, it ends after 3 turns, but you can reapply it constantly if you wish by just going down and then up again in health. In order to get this then, you need to interact with Abdurak within the Shattered Sanctum of the Goblin Camp, who is located right over here. Speak to him, agree to his offer of knowledge, and then you have to pass a couple of rolls, but one of the options will be to roll Constitution. If you pass a Constitution check, you actually fail at getting this buff, so you want to avoid that. After the interaction then, if you were successful at the other rolls, you get the buff, simple as that. Then we have Paid the Price, and while this is technically a buff, it's more interesting for the context and knowledge that it exists and what it does than what it actually does provide you. The effect itself is, well, +1 to Intimidation, which is pretty neat, but you trade that for disadvantage on perception checks and also a straight up inability to get critical hits forever. So, you know, not necessarily ideal by any means, but it's definitely an option to have, and the context of how you get it then is specifically with Auntie Ethel in the Riverside Tea House of Act 1. In your first conversation in this location, she will offer to attempt to remove your tadpole, and if you accept that offer from an actually evil creature to assist you, I'll leave you to experience it, but that's very simply how you'll wind up with this buff. After that then is Auntie Ethel's Hair, and this one is very simple but very strong, giving you the choice of one ability score to gain +1 from that point forward forever. As you may have guessed by the name of it, this is of course also hag based. In that same tea house, if you progress the quest to save Mayrina, you eventually fight Auntie Ethel. When you get her to low HP, she will stop the fight and beg for mercy. If you choose to spare her, this is what you get in return. Then we have Volos Eye. This, once acquired, gives you the ability to see invisible characters within 9 meters of you permanently. It also makes them have to succeed a roll or lose invisibility as a whole. This can be quite strong in certain situations to have, and it's just a fun interaction too, so as far as how to get this, back to the Goblin Camp of Act 1, there is a wandering bard named Volo being held prisoner. You want to free him either through diplomatic means or through combat, which leads to him going back to your camp. Talk to him here and you can ask him to research the tadpole, come back after a long rest, and he will offer to put you through surgery, and this is quite simply the end result of that. Moving on then, there is also the Necromancy of Thay. This is a big scary book of necromancy spells that you can find early on, and while it does have extended value later on that we'll also be talking about today, when you first get the book, you can read it, and as a baseline, you get access to the Speak with Dead spell, castable once per long rest, but it also lasts until long rest, so essentially you just gain the permanent access to this function. As well, if you pass all the conversation checks with the book, you gain a bonus buff that is +1 to wisdom checks and saving throws, which is also pretty much just permanent. To find the book in the first place then, in Act 1, genuinely right beside the Blighted Village waypoint itself, is a big open building with a cellar on the side over here. Then inside of the cellar there are some minor puzzles, but once you succeed at these, you gain access to a secret chamber, and the book is just waiting inside of there to be picked up. To actually open it though, you do need a secondary item, the Dark Amethyst. This is simply located in the Whispering Depths, which are just down the well right beside the Blighted Village Waygate. Next up is Buealls Benediction. This is a buff that I imagine absolutely no one would get on their first playthrough, naturally at least, and what this does is give you advantage on attack rolls against bleeding targets forever. And of course, if you have a way to consistently apply bleed, that can be extremely overpowered. That said, the price for this is pretty steep. To get this, you have to find the Festering Cove area, which you can reach easily by going to the Underdark from Auntie Ethel's lair. Once you get down here, you will find a group of Kuatoa revering the god Bueall. I don't want to take away any of the beauty of this experience from people doing it for themselves, so I don't want to spoil it, but long story short, one of the options that this leads to is the ability to sacrifice one of your companions, and this does lead to them straight up leaving the party. immediately dying and then never being seen again. So it is an extremely finalistic move, but the buff that you get in return is at least reasonably strong. Next up we have Survival Instincts, which is actually a bonus illithid power that you can only get one special way, and what the power does is once per short rest, you can use an action to apply it to yourself or an ally, which gives them a buff for 3 turns, which makes them gain 3d4 of healing instead of going unconscious if they are put to 0 health while it's active. So pretty damn strong for sure. To get this, then you need to get to the Underdark section of Act 1, specifically the Myconid colony, and talk to the vendors in the corner until you gain access to Omilum. This friendly mind flayer offers to help remove your parasite and asks you to gather some ingredients for him. Do so and bring them back and he will make you a potion. Drink the potion and you'll have to pass 3 saving throws. First, Constitution, then a choice between Wisdom or Intelligence, and then finally another choice of Wisdom or Intelligence. If all 3 checks are passed, you gain this brand new power. Then we have our final entry for Act 1, and it's worth saying that these buffs are extremely loaded into the first act, with almost half of the entire game's permanent buff list being in the first third of the game. But our last one here is the Awakened permanent buff, which lets the player cast illithid powers as a bonus action instead of a full action, which is pretty clearly quite powerful for anyone who knows the actual action economy of the game. To get this buff yourself, then you need to go to the Githyanki Crèche area in the mountain pass under the monastery that is there, and then on the western side of the Crèche it is a big scary machine whose name I won't even attempt to pronounce. You can use this machine yourself to attempt to remove the tadpole from your mind, and to avoid spoiling the whole thing, you have to then make 3 saving throws with this, and if you succeed all 3 saving throws, you get the buff. As simple as that. After that, we have the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, and this is just a consumable that you can drink to raise your strength stat by 2 permanently, including going above the natural limit of 20 for ability score, so this can be quite strong on the right class. Getting this one is pretty easy. In Act 2, when you reach Moonrise Towers, there is a room in the southeast corner with an NPC named Araj Oblodra, and she wants Asterion to bite her. Bring Asterion and tell him to do so. He won't necessarily be happy about it, but he will listen if you insist that he does, and she will give you this potion in return. If you also offer her some of your own blood for her research, she will return later on to offer another interesting potion that we'll be talking about in Act 3. Moving on, there's also Mistress Benevolence, which is a Gale-specific permanent buff that gives Gale advantage on concentration checks for his entire life, essentially, which is of course pretty damn powerful to have on a full caster. And this one is surprisingly easy to get too. In Moonrise Towers, again on the 2nd floor within Balthazar's bedroom on the north side, you want to access the secret room by interacting with the bookshelf and then picking up one of the human hearts in the room and sticking it in the altar that is revealed. In this room, there is a ritual circle that only can be interacted with if Gale is in your party, and so if he is, he will either offer to make something or destroy the circle, and if you choose for him to destroy the circle, then he gets this buff. Next up is Arabellas Shadow Entangle. This lets you use an action to entangle an undead or shadow creature against a strength check. It can be used as many times as you want, and it counts as concentration, but entangle can be quite strong to actually have access to, so having this just for free is great. Getting this then requires you to have saved the tieflings in Act 1, then in Act 2 you need to go to the House of Healing location in the main town. In the eastern side of this location is a sort of elongated section with a number of beds, and in 2 of these beds are a pair of dead tieflings. You can even speak with dead with them to learn what happened in greater detail, and after doing so you want to talk to Arabella once more, telling her what happened, completing the quest, and granting you your buff. Then we have Githzerai Mind Barrier, and this buff gives you permanent advantage on intelligence saving throws. This isn't necessarily the most common beneficial thing, but when it does come up, it is quite strong to have. To do this, specifically in the Mind Flayer colony area near the end of Act 2, you want to go to the nursery area with the big brain puzzle in it. Solve the puzzle, and it will open a door, and behind it, inside of which is a brain in a tube called the Waking Mind. Take this back to the center of the room, and you can actually jump to this back platform here. Many people will miss naturally. On this platform is a tool that you can use to talk to the brain tubes, and you want to insert the Waking Mind specifically into this to talk to the monk that is inside of it, and if you agree to purge his mind, you will get the buff. Then next is very spoiler heavy, so careful here, but it is called Partial Ceramorphosis. This activates all tier 1 illithid powers, unlocks the second tier to actually be purchasable, and also gives you permanent access to use Fly as an illithid power too. It is quite strong all in itself and is considered a story decision, though there is no negative story consequences to taking this if you want to. And to be specific about how you get it, at the end of Act 2, you are given an astral touch tadpole by your dream guardian. At this point, you can choose to either accept the tadpole's power or not, and if you do, this is what you gain. With that, then we move on to Act 3 for our last handful of entries, starting off with the Monk's Curse. This gives you the ability to cast Tash's Hideous Laughter once per long rest if you want to. Very simple, but the way to actually get this is a bit more complex. First, you need to find the Sentient Amulet. This is an item found in the Grimforge area of the Underdark in Act 1, right near the forge itself, in a nice little locked chest in the lava elemental area. Then if you talk with the amulet after you get it and pass its checks, it will give you a task. In Act 3, you want to head up to the Open Hand Temple in Rivington and find this hatch in the kitchen, which will let you into the crypt area. Go south through this area and you can find a coffin marked Shira Clarwin on the southwestern side of the room. Open it up and a sequence will play out where you get a choice. If you choose to bear the monk's curse, you will have to pass 2 ability score checks. For each failed check, you will permanently lose 1 wisdom, but if you succeed at both of them, you gain the buff with 0 consequences. After that is Unstable Blood, which permanently affects your character by making it so any blood pools that you leave on the ground when you are hit actually become flammable and also explosive. This can obviously be sort of detrimental, as your blood will generally be beside you, but with some careful planning and working around it, you can actually make this exceptionally useful in your favor as well, so it's up to you. Getting this then goes back to the Drow blood researcher from earlier on. If you gave her your blood in Act 2, you can then find her east of the Blushing Mermaid in the lower city, and as you approach, a number of explosions will happen. After that, you can talk to her, and she will ask you to drink a potion. If you do so, this will be the result. Moving on from that, then we have the Vampire Ascendant permanent buff, which is Asterion specific, and this one is pretty massive really. This gives a permanent bonus 1d10 necrotic damage to every weapon and unarmed attack that Asterion does, as well as giving him Ascendant Bite, dealing 66 necrotic damage and healing 66 as well. And also Ascended Misty Escape, which transforms him into a cloud, taking half damage from all sources while he's in this form, and making him able to fit through tiny holes too. To get this then, the answer is quite simple. Follow Asterion's questline as it leads into the main city of Baldur's Gate itself, follow him to Cazador's palace, find Cazador, and defeat him. Then you will have a number of choices of how to end this sort of storyline, and one of them is to allow Asterion to ascend, which gives him all these powers. Next up is the Mirror of Loss. This gives you +2 to any ability score of your choice. Very simple, very powerful, and in order to get this, then you need to follow Shadowheart's storyline specifically into Act 3, into the House of Grief, and to avoid the more particular spoilers of this quest, after you find Shadowheart's parents in here, in the back of that same room is the aforementioned Mirror of Loss. It's quite noticeable, really. First, you have to pass an Arcana or Religion check to recognize what the mirror is in the first place. Then you can make a Religion check to make a prayer. Then you choose to surrender a memory relating to each possible ability score. As long as you choose any actual memory instead of trying to deceive the mirror, the result is that you will get this permanent buff, but you also get a temporary debuff to -2 to the ability score related to the memory that you gave up. This debuff goes away, however, after a long rest, or if you use Remove Curse, so long term, you only get the buff and the debuff goes away, and every character in your party or in your camp even can do this individually too. After that, then just a quick couple more, both of which are in the same place in the magical wizard tower hidden in Sorceress Sundries. So go to this shop in the lower city and get through the portal shenanigans it has too. Then when you're in the actual tower itself, you want to climb down the staircase of floating magical furniture to reach the middle level. Here there are a number of buttons in the corners, and you can read their labels if you use See Invisibility. You want to find the one that specifically says Vault on it and click the button. Traverse through this vault area here until you reach the little maze-like area with the labeled doors. You want to specifically open the one that says Silverhand, then go through the Evocation door, then through the Wish door, and use the lever inside of this. This will open up the Elminster Vault back in the beginning point, and inside of this Elminster Vault you can find the Tharshiat Codex spell book. Reading this book gives you a permanent buff in itself, Tharshiat Vigor, which gives you 20 temporary hit points after any long rest that you do, just because you can. So that's a nice permanent buff in itself. But what this book also does is unlock a secondary feature of a different book we picked up earlier, Necromancy of Thay. If you read this book again after finding that second one, you will have a new check that you can pass. Pass the check and you unlock permanent access to the spell Danse Macabre, a 5th level spell that lets you summon 4 ghoul fiends who will fight alongside you, and this is actually pretty potent, so it's definitely worth checking it out. And that just about does it then, everyone. Every meaningful permanent buff that you can get for your character and your party in Baldur's Gate 3. I hope this has helped you out in some way, shape, or form, as a lot of these are absolutely off the beaten path or require choices that you may not have made the first time around. And undeniably, all of these, except maybe one, are a pure power increase for your party. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.